Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Steve Krantz. I had a long career at IBM. I retired in 2007, and I'm part of the cyber seniors community. So I'm looking forward to this talk. I hope to help, but it is challenging, and I know how challenging it is for those of us who didn't grow up with PCs, computers, smartphones. It's a new world. So I'm looking forward to sharing this. I hope it'll be helpful to everyone. The organization that I volunteer for and that I'm on the board is called Secure the Village. And the vision is to create a cyber secure village for all and turn people and organizations into cyber guardians so that they can self-protect and help others. What is personal cybersecurity? This is my definition. You want to maintain control of your personal information while using computers, smartphones, and other devices. And you don't want any unintended exposure of that information. And you want to be secure wherever you operate, at home, at work, at airports, and so forth. So let me start off with my one of my favorite slides, which is the story of a cybercrime. And so step one on the left, there's a gentleman sitting at his, in this case, it's an old-fashioned computer with a monitor that doesn't really, they do exist, but they're probably in junkyards. This individual opens an email and unfortunately clicked on a link or opened an attachment that he shouldn't have. And it installs malware on his computer. And the malware is represented by that little green guy above the text box. That's step one. That's the mistake that many of us make. I recently made such a mistake because I was too quick to click on a link. Luckily, it wasn't a serious error, but sometimes clicking on the wrong link or attachment can be very serious in terms of your financial security or identity security and so forth. Step two, that malware that the bad guy, that devilish guy in the upper left, that malware then installs itself on your device. It could be your smartphone, could be your laptop, and it allows that criminal to obtain login information and gain access to a financial account. In this case, this gentleman is typing in his ID, which is Steve the Sucker, and his password is I'm a moron, and that's captured by that little green guy, that malware, who then in step three transfers it to the cyber criminal, who uses it to get into the bank, get the money, and steal, and it's your money, and he's stolen it. So that's conceptually what happens, but there's a lot of reality here, and it's a lesson to be careful when, certainly in email, to make sure of the source of the email, and be very careful to examine email addresses, to examine links if they look like they come from a well-known source. Could be your bank, could be your credit card company. Make sure that that web address is accurate. So this is kind of the way I like to introduce my talks. So that's the story of a cybercrime. Now let's look at how do you protect yourself, starting at home from the bottom of this slide and away. So at home, and you can see some equipment there. Most of us have this equipment. We may not understand it completely. We might have a laptop or a desktop and a smartphone. It's going to communicate via Wi-Fi, a wireless network that's in most of our homes today. Didn't exist when we were kids. I'm still amazed by it, frankly. And it communicates with that little rabbit ear device, a little black rabbit ear device, the 3 ears. That's a router. And it, in turn, communicates with that gray box above it, which is the modem. And typically your service provider, your internet service provider, might also provide you with TV, like mine does. That's called a modem. That modem, so those two devices work together to get you through to the internet, which is that cloud above. And that's typically how the techies like me represent the internet. It's just a big cloud, which is uh, millions now, millions of computers out somewhere all over the world, connected by the internet, a totally worldwide connected network that, again, did not exist when we were kids. So, what's some of the things you need to think about when you're using these devices? Your Wi-Fi network has an ID, and you might see this acronym pop up, SSID, and that's your network name, your Wi-Fi network name. You want it to not be associated with you personally because it's visible to your neighbors. And one of your neighbors could be some joker sitting in a car listening, trying to get access to your personal Wi-Fi. So make it something that your neighbors don't know, make it unique, but easy to remember. And then the password that goes with it should be complex. You should, when you're setting that up, and if you don't know how to set it up, I understand, and you may need a professional to do it. The setup should include a firewall which filters traffic, makes sure that only the good guy traffic comes through, and that it is encrypted so bad guys listening in can't detect what it is. Again, if this is this is don't understand this, this might be a spot for a professional. And another piece of advice associated with this is, and most of us don't do it, we don't check it annually. Your modem should be checked annually. Again, if you don't know how to do it, you may have to hire a professional. Because what is a modem? That little black guy with the 3 ears. It's got software in it, it's actually, in this case, it's called firmware. And that firmware may have bugs. And the bad guys might be able to, through those bugs, through those errors, get access to your home network and hurt you. So once a year, you should be checking to make sure that the firmware in your router is up to date and any errors have been corrected. Okay, now let's look at if you're doing work at home or if you're a heavy user, you might want to use something which I use the acronym here, VPN. You may have heard that acronym. It stands for Virtual Private Network. If you're a work at home person, if you're really seriously concerned about your traffic and your communications, you can invest in it. It doesn't cost very much, can typically be a small monthly charge to have a virtual private network, but it gives you more control of the traffic that's going from you through your internet service provider out to the internet. Of course, passwords is a big subject. I'm going to talk about that, as I go on. But you want to have unique, long passwords and that are memorable. The longer, the better. NIST, the U.S. government agency that supervises and provides general advice, recommends a phrase, something like Spot wants belly rubs on his tummy. So if you have a dog named Spot, that's kind of memorable. It's very long and it's more protective. 2FA is something that you may or may not have heard of. That's in that box on the lower left. Stands for two-factor authentication. And I'm going to talk about that as we go forward. I have a slide dedicated and I'll show you what it means. But it's very important for your financial, especially your financial accounts, your credit card, anything that is very, very private to you and valuable to you. You want to use two-factor authentication, which is, in addition to an ID and a password, it gives another factor that the bad guy has to know to break in and steal from you and hurt you or take over your identity. Lock screens. If you're using your computer, you're taking it somewhere to a public place, you want to be careful about having it lock up. And that's a setting that you can do on your devices to lock it up so that if you lose your phone, you leave your laptop on an airplane, whatever, people have more difficult, it's more challenging for them to get in. So that's a setup thing that you do. And you might also want to worry about loss recovery in that same circumstance, and there are tools that allow you to do that. Some of the things that you want to do on your devices, and most devices come with this built in and kind of pre-set up antivirus and other associated checks that the software will do to protect you. Updates. You always want to listen to your uh, operating system updates. An operating system, for example, is Windows. If you have a Windows PC, you might get a notice from Microsoft on your computer, hey, you need to do an update. And that's something that you, today especially, you need to pay attention. Because what is Microsoft, why are these updates occurring? Because software is complicated and errors are inevitable. Software engineers, the people that create Windows, they're people just like us. They make mistakes. They're not perfect. And testing that software is very challenging. And so there are bugs, there are problems. And the bad guys all around the world, and we see it advertised everywhere, it's in the news, the cyber criminals, they will seek these errors and use them to break in. So you want to pay attention when your operating system company, like Apple or Microsoft, says do it. Tune up is it may also not only may say it typically says tune up or just update. Do it. Don't delay. Don't wait till mañana. Do it as soon as possible. Backup. What does that mean? If you've got important files, and in some case they can just be the pictures of your grandchildren, can be important files. You want to back them up. And how should you back them up? Remotely, in a distant place, over the internet. And there are cloud services and backup services that I would recommend that you use for those really important files. If you don't have important files, if you can lose if the files on your device aren't that important, you're really using it casually, don't worry about it. Same thing with the word encryption. What does that mean? It means hiding the content of the data on your devices. And encryption is the techie's term for making it very hard or nearly impossible for a casual observer to read the content of your device. And there are settings that you can use in Windows, and the Mac does it by default. But Windows has a setting where you can say, I want it encrypted, and your files get encrypted. And again, if a lot of what I'm saying is a mystery to you, and it can be, you may need professional help to help you, or taking courses in going a little more in depth. Now let me go up to the top and talk about the outside world, because it's different in the outside world, the kinds of things that you need to be concerned about. If you're using your smartphone outside, it'll use or your iPad or tablet. Its communication is called cellular data, and it's encrypted, so it's relatively safe. Sometimes you may be tempted when you're in an airport, and now, yay, it seems like we can start traveling again. I know I'm looking forward to it. My wife and I are starting to stick our heads up and say, hey, maybe we can go to nice places like we used to before the pandemic. We're going to be in an airport. It's very tempting to use Wi-Fi, same Wi-Fi technology that you use at home. You want to use it when you're in the airport. And it's free and it's advertised. And be very careful. Even if there's a password, it's very risky and I wouldn't use it. So and maybe that's an important takeaway as we start to travel. Be very wary of public Wi-Fi. What you should do, and look on the lower left, is invest in, as I said earlier, a VPN, a virtual private network that is encrypted and protects your communications when you're in an airport, when you're in a Starbucks. So investing in a virtual private network is an important thing to do. Okay, I promised to talk about two-factor authentication. And here's a diagram that hopefully should explain it and make it clear. I'm sitting at my laptop at home. I want to log into my bank. In this case, it's Bank of America. It could be any bank. So I log in, I provide my ID and password. I have set up on my Bank of America account two-factor authentication. And what that does is, when I've set that up, Bank of America is going to send a code. In this case, it's 32451, is just an example, to my smartphone. I get a beep, I look, I take that number, and fill it in on my laptop, and that allows me to complete the connection with my bank. This is much harder for a scammer or a criminal to steal your ID password and get in and ultimately steal your money. So in fact, if your bank doesn't offer this, change banks. You need to use two-factor authentication. In my opinion, it's more important than a password, having this process. It's painful, can be a pain in the you-know-what, but it will be it's saving you from significant risk. So if it's available, you use it. There are different ways to do it. There are apps that are actually more secure than just getting a text of the code to your smartphone. There are apps like Authy and Duo Mobile and Google Authenticator. If you're really concerned, if you think you're a target, if you're rich and famous, and some of you may be, I don't know, I know I'm not. But if you're rich and famous, a YubiKey is a device that you can plug into your computer, plug into your phone, and it's almost impossible for a hacker to break in and steal your identity and get into your account. Most people, I don't have one. I don't feel I'm that risk, but I do use two-factor authentication for my investment, for my bank, for my credit cards. I use it. And again, if your credit card or your bank does not offer it, change. They're not paying attention to safety for you. They're not concerned about you. So let me go into what I call my top 10 list. And the number one thing that we recommend at SecureTheVillage is freezing your credit at the 4 credit bureaus. And you may not know of the 4 credit bureaus. I'll name them: Experian, Equifax, TransUnion, and one that most people don't know, Innovis. And doing this is easy. You go to their websites, Experian, Equifax, TransUnion, and Innovis, and they will have options. I don't have the time in this presentation to go through each. It's in my book if you want to use that as a reference, but it's not that hard. You don't need a book. What that does is if your personal information is stolen, and sad to say, most of our personal information is already for sale on what's called the dark web. So if your personal information is stolen, including your social security number, and someone says, I'm you. So someone is going to go to one of these credit bureaus and say, I'm Steve Krantz, and I want a mortgage because I'm buying a house. If I haven't frozen my credit and that person convinces this credit bureau that they're me, they get the loan. And guess who's stuck with paying the loan? The real me. It's a significant prevention of identity theft, the most painful kind of identity theft. So today, if you haven't done it, go do it. This may be the most important message I can share with you in this presentation. If you have not frozen your credit at the 4 credit bureaus, you should. You should do it immediately. Number 2, coming back, once again, two-factor authentication. Talked about it already. Talked about listening to your operating system like Microsoft or your Apple computer, your Mac. Keep your software up to date on all your devices, and make sure that that prompt is coming from them. You can tell by looking at the web address. If you're not sure, go to the website directly, separately yourself. You want to make sure you got antivirus running on your devices. Most cases, that's kind of by default. It's already set up. If you're not sure and you don't know how to do it, you may want to have a professional help you. It's helpful to have long, memorable, unique passwords at your accounts. Again, it helps you protect your login. It's harder for a casual hacker to represent themselves as you. Moving on. Number 6, and we talked about this already when I discussed the story of a cybercrime. In email, don't click on attachments or links unless you expected that email to have that material and you're sure of the source meaning the person who has sent you the email. And believe me, there's tricks galore. I really shouldn't admit this, but I got up early. I got an email from LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. It's a business networking website, if you've not heard of it. And I got a notice that you've got a notice on LinkedIn. And I didn't look at it carefully. I should have. Luckily, I clicked on the link and it popped up something obscene, frankly. I won't go into detail what that was. And it shocked me that I, supposedly the expert, could be fooled this way, but any one of us can be fooled. So what did I do? First of all, I said, "Oh my God, how can I be so stupid?" And I immediately I went to my antivirus software. I ran it to check to make sure there's no new virus. I shut my computer down, started it up again, and everything was fine. So even you can be deceived. So make sure when you're getting email that it's expected and you're sure of the source, that the email address that sent it to you is who it says it is. Number 7, also talked about this earlier. Set up your home router with a non-personal SSID or network name, memorable and strong password, and encryption. And I include this acronym WPA2. Don't worry about it. That's how it should be set up. If this is a mystery, you need a professional to set it up. And if you've had a router for 4 or 5 years and you haven't looked at it, you haven't touched it, and you're afraid to screw it up, get a professional. Number 8, maintain a remote multi-version backup of your computer files. And remote meaning over the internet. If you have such files, if your personal photos, if your records, if you're a creator of content like I am, you want to make sure that it is not just in one place, because you can lose stuff. And bad guys can use what's called ransomware. You may have read about ransomware to really hurt you and for these files that are very dear to you. Number 9, and this one I'm going to show off. I'm going to show off my smartphone lock screen with an alternate phone number and email. And now I'm going to pop up a picture, and believe it or not, this is my beautiful wife. And that's not her real phone number, but it's a made-up phone number. But I have a picture of my wife on my phone when it goes to sleep, and it has her picture, it has her phone number, and my email. So if a good Samaritan finds my lost smartphone, they'll call my wife and she'll tell me and I'll go get my phone. So I strongly recommend that. It's an easy thing to do. Last but not least, number 10, my number 10, is create what I call a kick the bucket letter for your heirs. So for those of us who are seniors, some of us start to think about tomorrow, and maybe I won't be here. And I want my children and my grandchildren to know what to do in my online life. So a kick the bucket letter, and there's a lot more details in my book where I talk about what you should include, would be simply put your IDs, your passwords, the websites, your online presence. You want to create that letter. You want to put it with your will, your other important traditional documents for end of life. So that's my top 10. So there's a lot more than top 10. My book includes over 50. And there's a checklist that you can just download right now. You can go to my website, which after listening to me a while, you know I'm a nerd. So my website is nerdseiview.com. And you click on the CyberGuardian security checklist, and that'll help a lot, I think, in telling you what to do. Some things you won't need to do, some things you will. It's not a must-dos for everything. Let me go over some other. It's kind of repeat what I've said about the four credit bureaus: Experian, TransUnion, Equifax, and Innovus. They offer freeze pins, which are private numbers that you get when you freeze your credit. Number three, Equifax actually changed. My pin that I got with them a couple of years ago is still valid, but they've actually changed to two-factor authentication. But those are, as I said earlier, you want to get those, you want to freeze your credit at those four sites, and of course, protect that PIN. Not just for the old, it's for everybody to do this. Number five, cell phone provider PIN. Most of us have this. Most of us, when we've set up our cell phone account, we'll get a PIN, we'll set up a PIN. Either they give it to us or we can change it, use our own. Why is that important? Well, again, this is one of these sad tales. People want to, essentially pretend that they're you, to take over your phone. So somebody could be, let's say, the phony Steve Krantz, the criminal who's out to get Steve Krantz. He has all my personal information because he bought it on the dark web. He will call my cell phone provider and say, I'm buying a new phone, send me the SIM card. And they will, unless I have a PIN that he doesn't know, and that's private. So you want to make sure that your cell phone provider, that you have a PIN with them, and that they will challenge anyone who calls pretending that they are you. Last but not least, while it's tax season, this is still very relevant. I would like to ask I could ask for a show of hands. How many of you have an IRS identity protection PIN? I'll bet you none of you do. I do. Why? Why do I have an IRS identity protection PIN? Because I don't want someone submitting my taxes for their benefit. So if someone has your personal information and can submit, they're smart enough to submit a tax, the federal income tax and state as well, depending on where you live, they will. And they'll, of course, indicate refund. And that's it. They'll get the refund. And when you submit your real taxes, what happens to you? You get nothing. So go to irs.gov and you can request an identity protection PIN. You get one every year. And you put it on your taxes. If someone does your taxes, you give that number to them. I have been doing my own taxes for many years, being a nerd. And so when I get my identity protection PIN, I just enter it into my, the tax software I use, and I'm protected. No one can submit my taxes for me. So what does that give me? That gives me 6 PINs. So this is one of my favorite slides. I love the graphic that I created. Okay, getting towards the end. Secure is a relative term, and I think it's important to reflect on that. And let's look at this. Let's look at this table. What column? The first row it talks about the different areas. What is the most secure things you can do? What's kind of in the middle or mezzo secure, and what's the least secure? Let's talk about going down to the second row, websites and apps that you might use. The most secure is, as I said earlier, a YubiKey. It's a device you can buy. It's not very expensive. That is the most secure way to protect access to an account that you have for your credit card, for your investments, whatever. In the middle, mezzo secure is two-factor authentication. And for most of us, that's good enough. That's all I use. I don't have the YubiKey. Least secure is just an ID and a password. So understand there's relatives. For some websites, ID and password's fine. For most casual information that you share, an organization, whatever, ID and a good, strong, long, memorable password's fine. But anything to do with money, two-factor authentication, don't fool around. In terms of your networks, I talked a little bit about virtual private network. That's the most secure for data transmission. Kind of in the middle is your home Wi-Fi and your cellular data on your smartphone when you're out in the world. Public Wi-Fi, the least secure. In fact, I consider it insecure and will not use it unless I can use my virtual private network with it. And in terms of passwords, the most secure password is, as I indicated earlier, a long, memorable one. Of course, if you don't have a dog named Spot, you may not remember this. So substitute your own dog's name in this on this passphrase. Then a lot of the systems today give you this crazy conglomeration of letters, which no one can remember. And I don't like this at all. Where I go is with two-factor authentication. And of course, the least secure is to just use the word password, which, unbelievable as it seems, many foolish, lazy people use for self-protection. Okay, so now let's look at this in a different way. How do I achieve reasonable security? How do I protect myself? So, and this is in terms of risk. Different people have different risks. The average person, everybody is the second column. In the middle is people who are heavy users, people who work at home. Most of us maybe, I would assume are retired. So, and we may consider ourselves heavy users. At the highest risk would be high net worth people, the rich, the famous, the business owners. Now I'm going to address the middle row is my security checklist. Went over the top 10, everybody should just do them. Then review the rest and consider doing them based on the pain, how much it costs, and the time and effort. And I define that down at the bottom. If you're a heavy user, you're a work at home, invest in the virtual private network. Complete the high and the very highly rated items in the checklist, again, versus pain and effort. And then if you're Brad Pitt, you better invest in a YubiKey. You better complete all of these things. Don't fool around, because people are gunning for your bucks. They know you're a rich guy. And the frequency. If you do the top 10 and annually you're diligent, probably going to be okay. If you're increasing risk, you're one of these heavy users, you're a work at home, every 3 months, check everything. Make sure you're doing it right. And the high net people, they have to be very, very diligent. So I hope this was helpful. Put it in your head. Where should I be investing my time? Okay. Now I'm trying to introduce a concept called personal attack surface. You're there at the middle. That dashed circle is your personal attack surface. And it's dashed because it's porous. The bad guys can get in. And it's broken up into three areas. What you do, what do? You do email, you do text, you make phone calls, you browse. Some of you play games. I've started to play Wordle the other day. I'd never played it before. What you use, your devices, your smartphone, your PC, and you use your home network, kind of the things that you deal with. And then on the lower left there, your data. You've got your name, your phone number, blah, 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 your passwords, your social security number, things like that. So you don't want this to be porous. But the reality is, the bad guys, they'll send you phishing emails. They'll smish you. Probably don't know what smish is. A smish is when you get a text from a bad guy. That's called a smish. And you probably don't know what a vish is. A vish is when you get a phone call from a scammer. And there's things like phony web ads, and they come at you. So what do you do? What do you do? You educate yourself. You're a smart person. You're here learning from me, and you can also look online, learn more. Cyber Seniors is a great resource for information to help yourself. Looking at what you use, your network. The bad guys spy on the networks. They deliver malware over the networks. So what do? You prepare your devices. You back up your information. You encrypt your information. You prepare and you maintain. You don't just do it once and forget it. I'm sure you've never looked at your modem once it was installed. It should be an annual exercise, unfortunately. Now, if I look at my data, one of the things I got to worry about, identity theft. If all my information can be taken, someone can represent themselves as me and steal a lot of money from me, cause me a great deal of difficulty. They can swap out my SIM card, turn their cell phone into my cell phone. My cell phone's dead and they are me, and they can defeat two-factor authentication. So making sure you got a PIN with your phone company is very important. They can do credit card fraud. So what do? You take protective action. You freed your credit, for example. If you do these things, you build a CyberGuardian wall. And there's that CyberGuardian wall. See, I delivered it on the slide. And the bad guys look for somebody else. This person's too protected. Okay. So it's a reality. Cybercrime is a reality for us. Make yourself hard to impersonate. Two-factor authentication, the 6 pins that I talked about earlier. Make sure you know who you're communicating with. And there's a Benjamin, one of the fathers of our country, distrust and caution are the parents of security, and be prepared. Update your software, back up your data, etc. And the bad guys, again, they go elsewhere. One suggestion you might want to try is an app, which is called Better Now. It's available on the App Store or Google Play, and it incorporates my security checklist into 2 templates. And when you use the app, you'll see those as listed. And the 2 templates are Security Base and Security Plus. And you can step through each, score yourself, and improve your personal cybersecurity step by step. Follow-up questions, there's my email. The reference I gave earlier is my book is on Amazon. There's my website. I do have a son who does support for a living, but he would be remote for many of you. He's in the San Fernando Valley, but I include him there as a reference. And thank you.